One, making sure, first of all, can everybody hear me okay? Perfect.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you for taking the time, our teachers, our parents, for filling out the survey as we try and figure out and explain our roadmap to what's coming. Just want to make sure everyone is muted. Perfect. So the purpose of this session is to find out basically what would be what's unclear about our current plan. The agenda is, can I get that shared so that everyone can see the agenda? Jane or Paula, do you happen to have a copy of that we can share?
Yes, hold on one second.
Okay. So while she's doing that, basically, what we're going to do today is talk about two different aspects of what we've been working on to be ready for the fall. There may be some things that we haven't totally figured out yet, but that's where this session will come in handy. We really want to make sure that we're prepared for whatever the governor comes down with tomorrow. And so whatever he says, we're going to have to pivot from that. But we've made 3 different plans on what to do. Either we're going to be totally distance learning, hybrid, or everybody's back in the building. So with that, what I'd like to do is introduce everybody. Obviously, Jane, you want to start? Introduce yourself.
Yes, hi, I'm Jane Wegener Venema. I am the vice chair on the board of directors, and I am also the 11th grade humanities teacher. So I'm here to take notes and help share screens and have information available.
And Paula?
Hi, I'm Paula Coughlin, and I am the school nurse at Eagle Ridge Academy and also a parent to an incoming 4th grader.
Thanks, Paula.
Sure.
And my name is Ramel Pornschlogel. Your students or your children will refer to me as Mrs. P. And I just want to let everybody keep in mind that we have quite a few people on our session today. So pay attention to the chat window. There'll be some questions in there. And then of course, questions and concerns, we'll address that towards the end. We're going to divide this meeting into 3 different sections. We're going to talk about our health and our screening. We're going to talk about curriculum and instruction. And then finally, we'll do some brainstorming and questions at the end. Okay. So our health and our screening, I want to start with, does anyone have any questions first about what they may have looked at? Or any questions of right off the bat? We can put those in the chat as we go. And I'm going to start talking about what is happening as we get ready for cleaning. So our cleaning, we will be disinfecting our surfaces. Our commonly touched surfaces will be will be cleaned every 2 hours in 2-hour intervals throughout the day. They'll be sanitized also in the evening in accordance with the MDE guidelines that have been, and CDC guidelines that have been given to us. Okay, Jane, is that agenda are we having concerns with that?
I'm working on it. I do not have privileges to share my screen just yet.
Okay. All right. All right. So in our road to coming, our roadmap to reopening, the priority is it's really, we want to be, safety is our top priority. Safety of our students, and cleaning plans will reflect our federal, our state, our local regulations. And that's what I'd like to share with you today, is what we're doing to make sure that your children, as well as the staff, are safe when they're here in the building. And then also, what is it going to look like for our students in the fall? We'll continue to follow those federal guidelines, state and local regulations, and depending on how things go throughout the year, we may need to pivot on things. So it was, when we did send out the survey, it was clear by over 70, almost a little over 75% of our families that face-to-face is what we all prefer. That is the best way to provide a classical education. And that's hopefully what we'll all get back to someday. And so we'll talk a little bit about what we're going to do. Let's make sure that's taken care of. And that's what we'll get back to, and I'll make some more.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. And I'll make some more references to that as we go along. Okay.
No, I cannot. अरे चलने हाँ आप पूछो कार में बैठे जाओ.
Thank you. All right. So we do, one of the things that most of the people who are on this session is for 6th through 8th students. If you have any questions for the lower grades, for K through 5, we'll definitely have to get back to you specifically about that. If it's specifically dressed for a classroom, and that I might not know the answer, or Jane or Paula might not know the answer. But anything we don't have a specific answer for today, we will definitely take notes and address it, because our goal is obviously to make sure that we're doing the best that we can for our students and our staff. So as we,
Can I ask a question? I had put that in the chat, just curious. So we have a family with kids in multiple grades, and we have a middle schooler. If there is a sibling who is sick in the morning, does that mean the whole family stays home? You know, somebody who wakes up with like a stomach ache or whatever. Does that mean that everybody in the family is home? Is it just the person that has a symptom, the sibling that has a symptom, or how are you going to handle that, recommendations on that? Does that make sense?
mm-hmm.
That's a great question, and I'll take that one. So certainly we know that kids are going to have symptoms that are not COVID related. We are asking that all families do a daily health check. Now, if your child's symptoms were on the symptom check, as far as symptoms related to COVID-19, you know, cough, shortness of breath, fever, chills, sore throat, muscle aches, headache, loss of taste or smell, or even gastrointestinal issues are on that list, that would flag your health check. And prior to you sending your children to school, I would be reaching out to you to discuss the symptoms and make a plan as far as next steps. Obviously, if it's stomach ache and that's the only symptom, that singular symptom would not hold your child back from getting from being able to come to school. We're looking at in the symptoms: fever, chills, sore throat, muscle aches, headache, loss of taste or smell, or gastrointestinal. They would have to have 2 symptoms to have to hold them back from coming to school. If your child had symptoms such as cough or shortness of breath, or had a combination of 2 of those that were COVID-related symptoms, then I would ask that 1, we have a conversation, but 2, that you hold all your children back, because if it is COVID, then your entire family has been exposed, and we certainly wouldn't want to have your children come to school and expose their classmates. But again, it's really going to be on a case-by-case basis. We're going to be following our protocols, using the Department of Health as our as the experts to guide us as we make our decisions. We want to make sure that the children are safe and the staff is safe.
Thank you. That's helpful. Sorry, also just follow up. Does that mean that you would be like available for that phone conversation early in the morning, you know, before?
Yes, so the health checks will be, the reminders for health checks will be going out at 7:15 in the morning. So if your children are not feeling well, my recommendation would be that you don't put them on the bus if they're bussers.
Okay.
But I would be available early to have that conversation with parents.
Okay, thank you. You were helpful.
No problem.
Any other questions from anybody else about particularly in that particular topic?
I just want to quick jump in and let everyone know that I just typed the agenda into the chat. We're having some screen sharing difficulties right now. So I typed the agenda in case it's not clear. Health and screening and curriculum and instruction fall under number 2, clarification. So it's kind of 3 pieces, and then under clarification, there's 2 different parts.
All right, any questions? And otherwise I will move on to some more information about health and screening. So one of the things that you can expect is that we will provide one face mask for the students and 2 for our staff. Everyone will be required to wear those throughout the building. Our commonly used surfaces, they're going to be cleaned every 2 hours in 2-hour intervals. And then, of course, we're going to be sanitizing the building in the evening hours. And Paula, you had talked about what happens if a student gets sick. We also will be protecting students by having hand sanitizing stations. We had a professional service come in and help us determine where to put those hand sanitizing stations and hand washing stations. 1 mask per day or per month. Actually, we'll give 1 mask. It's a cotton mask. It kind of looks just like this. And if they happen to forget it, we'll have extras. We really want to make sure that the students are wearing their masks. We encourage parents to wash the masks when the students are in the building. Can the students put their masks on after eating and drinking? Yes. Yes. One of the things we are broadcasting out to our students and staff and will help the kids remember is we really want to encourage students to wash their hands every 2 hours. Using the sanitizing stations, it really has to start becoming the norm now of cleaning pretty often. I'm going to read this next question from Ryan. When the survey was sent out, Minnesota case counts were declining at a fairly steady rate, with cases climbing back to peak levels. Comfort level and exposing kids was definitely changed since taking the survey. Have you guys taken the change in the Minnesota situation into account from when the survey was taken? And for this one, Ryan, could you clarify a little bit by what you mean by taking into account? What specifically are you looking for clarification upon?
Yeah, I initially had answered that I was comfortable sending kids back to school, and part of it is I have a daughter that basically lives in the nurse's office with respiratory issues. And so now that things are climbing back up, specifically for my 3rd grader, not so much my 7th grader, there's a lot more concern in sending in. Now, granted, with distance learning being an option, I'm going to be signing up for that. I was just wondering, every time we've had these meetings or gotten communication, the survey's been referenced, but the situation in the state has changed pretty drastically since that survey initially was sent out. That's the crux of my question.
Great. Actually, a great question, and I'll go into a little bit more in depth when we talk about curriculum. But basically, the 3 scenarios that we have, somebody who chooses to do distance learning only is on the table and can be done, especially if you're concerned about the health of your child and you want to stay and do distance learning at home throughout the entire year. That's fine. You can also just choose to do it for 5-week intervals at a time, basically by bi-quarterly. That's up to you, depending on your comfort level. But yes, that just staying at home and doing the distance learning is a viable option.
And
Absolutely.
Ryan, just to expand on that a little bit, I do believe that our directive from the Department of Health from the governor and the Department of Education was to come up with 3 plans.
Mhm.
We're waiting on the guidance from the governor and from the Department of Health and the Department of Education for what their recommendations are based on our current case levels in the state of Minnesota. So I do believe that what we hear tomorrow is going to take into account that, and that may influence their decision. It may not, but I know that the case numbers and the prevalence of COVID in certain areas is definitely something that is going to impact their decision. So I feel comfortable in saying that we're going to make the best decision for our student body given the guidance that we get.
Thank you.
So the next question was a question about the gym as well as instruments. This is a really good question, and we're actually working on this right now, knowing that, especially with the students in the band and the choir, social distancing really is important in those particular areas with band and choir, because they do use their mouths, and we do know that students who have performed in choirs have spread the virus. And so we are really working on trying to do real in-depth physical distancing in those classrooms. So it's not a class that we would eliminate at all. It's just something we're working at with. They're in the building. How would we do it if it's online, to do the hybrid? And maybe we just need to move classrooms. But what we are really looking at, making sure we have a big enough room and space for the students who are in the band and choir. It's one of our top priorities for our classes as we look at our social distancing for that particular class. So we are working on that, and we will share that moving forward. The next question, does the mask need to be uniform? Jane, I don't know if that needs to be uniform.
Yesterday, Ramel, it came up on the call, and the response that Janelle shared with the K2 parents was that it would fall in line with the, no writing on the mask,
Right.
that it was simple. It didn't have to be, uniform colors. She said that the School of Grammar was looking at writing something into the student handbook around uniforms. So I think more to come with that. But at this point, it wasn't going to be required that it was school colors.
And then we will be providing them with one, but I believe they're trying to order them just in a black and just a traditional color.
Yep.
Will the students be required to wear masks all day long? Yeah. So we'll staff.
And students
go ahead.
will be able to have a mask break. So if they're going out for recess and they're able to social distance, they will be able to have a mask break during those times. Obviously, during the time that they're eating, they will not be required to be wearing masks, but we do need to follow the guidelines for masks.
Yeah. What's the next question here? Will distance learning and in-class learning go together, or will be different experiences? Actually, they'll be similar, almost identical experiences. The teachers, we currently actually do this already in the School of Rhetoric. We do kind of a hybrid learning already when we partner with Nova. So the teachers will be given their cameras, And it will be synchronous learning where students will be able to log in and they'll be on camera and they'll be interacting more with the teachers than we did in the spring. We noticed in the spring when we were doing asynchronous, when students could just log in and take notes or could log in and just watch a video, it really limited the effectiveness of what we really believe in classical education. And so what we want to do, and we're moving forward, is using the LMS, the learning management system called Canvas. And Canvas will allow the teachers and the students to have one continuous platform. And if Google Classroom will sign right into that, Infinite Campus will align with that. But we're hoping to have students, if half of the students are at home and half of them are here, then we want to make sure that they're getting the same experiences at the same time. Any questions on that? Plans to maintain teaching levels for remote. Students may fall behind for the remote option. Ram, could you tell me a little bit more about what you're asking?
Sure. So what I noticed, I think maybe you might have just touched base a minute ago, during the last spring, right, where they had asynchronous classes. What I noticed is my kids were falling behind on understanding the math or understanding the science, where they had more interactive in the class. So now with the remote option, I don't know, does parent has to be hand holding them, or will there be a different teaching levels for the remote? I mean, you mentioned it would be like a same experience for the kid in the class, for the kid who are in the remote. But obviously kids being remote, they might not be focused all the time, right? Watching the screen, looking at the laptop or iPad, 4 to 5 hours a day. It's easy to get distracted, right? And that's where I'm concerned. Like, and it's not a concern. So I'm just making sure that will the teaching levels will be different, or will they maintain same?
I think there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve right away out of the gate for the students who are just not real familiar with synchronous learning. It's just going to take time to get back into that routine after being away from it for the summer. And for the students who didn't have a lot of synchronous learning in the spring. But that's one of the great things about training our teachers, is that they're going to be looking for students when they'll have access to see all of their students. So they'll be looking for students who are not engaged. It is not, distance learning like that. It's not what we prefer. We prefer that face-to-face interaction, but our teachers are being trained on how to look for that, especially with the Canvas system and looking on video. So there will be a learning curve, but looking for students who are not engaged is a real high priority for our staff.
Got you. I just put a follow-up question. I'll just finish up that rather than take another one. So if I chose a remote option and seeing the schedule for a particular class or a day, if the kids want to go to the school, can they just drop in, or a prior notice is required?
Good question. Prior notice is required in our roadmap to reopening. I have it written down here about how many, is it a 2-day notice, Paula? If somebody
let me look here.
I have it written down. I believe it's if they're at home and you are doing the distance learning, we need a 2-day notice if they're going to come back into the building, if they were doing a totally distance learning, because we need to prepare to make sure that we have the space for them in the classroom. Knowing that we have to distance learning in a classroom, we're only going to have enough chairs and enough tables for the amount of people that can fit in that classroom safely. I mean, we're removing our common furniture from upstairs just to eliminate excess space usage so that we can maximize distance learning and just social distancing as well. So in our roadmap, I wrote it down here too. It's a 2-day notice that the school needs to be given before students can come back. If they're going to do distance learning, we need a 2 days notice. And all of this is shared and will be reshared again with parents so that we know that everyone is well informed.
Yeah, perfect. That'll be great. I think somebody has mentioned in the chat, it's a 1 week notice. I mean, at times, 1 week notice might be tough, right? Because when you see the schedule, okay, you know what, starting Monday, there is a class on Thursday, which is complex or needs on class, right? I don't know if one week is 1 week is viable. I would request to see if 1 week, if 2 days makes sense, but if it's 1 week, then I would request to see if it can be changed to 2 days.
Yeah, Ramel, just to clarify, and sorry, I don't have a page number on my plan, but it's a 1 week notice to move from distance learning to in-person, a 2-day notice to move from in-person to distance learning.
And
Okay,
so,
thank you.
So Ram, were you asking for just a 2-day notice to go from distance learning to school, to going
That
into in-person?
That is correct. Yep.
Yeah,
If
that's
possible,
something that I think we really do need to have a 1 week notice.
And it's on page 26 of the roadmap. I just found it.
Thank you.
Sure.
And would you mind if I put one more follow-up? Sorry if I'm taking time. So 1 week, if it's required, okay, we will plan for that. But will the class schedule be published, like what's going to be taught or what's being planned to taught at least 2 weeks or at least more than 1 week? That way we can say, you know what, this topic is coming. Kids want to be on site. I can give a 1 week notice.
Normally we don't post the lessons ahead of time. It's because the students will be going to their regular hours every day. So we don't normally just post what we're going to be doing. It's not like a college course where you see what's coming down the road. That would be something that you would have to talk to the teachers about, or is there a project coming up? And that would have to be an individual conference with the teachers if you want to know what's coming up a week down the road.
Okay, fair enough. Yep. I think as you said, there'll be learning curve on both ends. So yep,
Yeah.
Point taken.
Okay. Does my child have to be in front of the screen 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. for distance learning? Yes and no. The classes are synchronous. There are, just like when you're here in the building for students, they're in their classes for the 50-minute periods, and there'll be time to decompress. It's not time that we will just let the students walk around in the hallway. Obviously, we need to do distance learning safely, but no, they don't have to be tied to their computer from 8 to 3, but the computer, if you're doing distance learning, is the main form of communication. So there may be parts of the class where they're working on their own, so they don't have to look at the computer, but the computer will have to be on. That when you're distance learning, that is the mode of communication. Yeah, that would be, like I said, a yes and a no. How are you going to group the children? Advice is to keep same groups. How does that work when students are at different learning levels? Or will the same math be the same learning group? Paula, are you talking about, okay, so how are we going to group the children? Do you mean like how are we grouping? It's by classes. You get to choose, I mean, do you want to choose if you're staying home? Is that what you're asking about? Or are you asking about who would be in A group, who would be in B group?
I just know that they are recommending, at least at the child care center that I direct, that we keep the same groups of children together all the time, which I realize can work when you're in a lower class, because let's just say first graders, they're together all the time. But when you get to middle school, especially in math, you have different math levels
Mhm.
of learning that the students are at. So I guess I'm curious, when they're in the building, are they still going to have, you know, they're going to be in span, or I don't know, history with, you know, ABC kid, but then when they go to math, they're with XYZ kid. Does that clear
Yeah,
up?
it does. It makes sense.
Okay.
So one of the things we're looking at is, and that's one of the issues that we are looking at. It's because of this, we are going to have to break up the students A and B. So in a group like that, and then within that A group, they can travel with those students. Traveling, we can't travel exactly like they do in the School of Grammar, where just 20 kids stay together all day, because some students have different math groupings and some will have different Latin groupings. So that's why we're just going to break the students in an A group and a B group. And then we just are going to monitor the social distancing in that. But just going around with 20 students in the School of Logic and Rhetoric is something that's not feasible. But one of the aspects, the positive aspect of that, if there is any really, is that our older students it's easier to teach them about the social distancing and having them follow those guidelines and keeping their masks on and washing and the hand washing. So that's just something that we know we have to be diligent on, because students do need to travel. One of the things we are looking at is making sure that everything is monitored, and when walking in the hallway, as well as having one-way stairways so that students aren't facing each other as much as possible, along with making sure that students aren't hanging around in the hallways. So when students come into the building, they go straight to their classrooms. There's not that hanging around issue. And then of course, lunches will be provided and they'll be eating in classrooms rather than in the big cafeteria where everybody would sit, 16 people or 12 people at a table looking at each other. So it's a little different for the Schools of Logic and Rhetoric, but we have students that, because of their maturity level, they can handle the aspects of the requirements of washing hands and keeping those masks on.
And I agree, Ramel, as we kind of look through the School of Grammar, we're planning for them to stay in their class cohorts and not doing the mixing. And we are, completely understand where you're coming from, Paula, as far as those are the recommendations. But as Ramel said, at this age, these kids are more reliable in the sense of being able to follow the guidelines as far as social distancing. One of the pieces that the consultant did recommend for us is to have some kinds of barriers that we're going to be using in the classroom setting too. So in the School of Grammar, we're going to be using plexiglass barriers on the desks where they will stay there with the kids all day long. And in the Schools of Logic and Rhetoric, those students will have a barrier that they'll bring with them. So that is providing more kind of a safety net for them while they're in the classroom as well. But I think breaking the kids up into kind of, cohorts of A and B, that kind of becomes their group. And, we're going to be really trying to make there fewer opportunities for congestion and fewer opportunities where we could potentially spread the virus. But I think, all in all, it just comes to just being very intentional, and as parents also, reminding our children that they need to follow the guidelines so that they keep themselves safe and their classmates safe.
Will there be additional recess breaks? Oh, I'm sorry. Was there any more questions on that? The next question was, will there be any additional recess breaks throughout the day, even for older students, to allow students time for fresh air? We don't have planned recess time, extra recess times planned, but if teachers want to spread out and use different parts of the building or go outside, that's always recommended. Obviously, distance is a good thing. So while it's not in the schedule, teachers, of course, can use that at their discretion. All right. Does Canvas use video? You know, that is a good question. I have to double check on that.
Yes, it does.
Does it? Thank you, Susan.
And there's a question about the devices that you can use. It's device agnostic, so it can be used with anything, including an iPhone, and is available offline as well.
Android?
Anything.
Anything, good. Not everybody's an iPhone user. Perfect. There are certain classes that seem to have a need for more support when remote, math, for example. So will there be additional resources or people available to work with a child who needs help? That is actually one of the things we are addressing with teachers to make sure, because of the distance learning aspect, there are going to be students who need extra support. And so that is one of the things that we're working for professional development to help our teachers really look for that and address that, because that is a real concern. And so I'll just definitely affirm the fact that our teachers will be aware of that and looking forward so that they can provide that extra assistance when needed. The uniforms, we already talked about that. Distance learning, does a kid need to wear a uniform? If they're on video, they should be in uniform. We should see if their shirt, I'm just going to keep it at that. If they're on video, they should be in uniform. If they're in the building, they should be in uniform. Are the school supply lists the same? As far as I know, they are.
The question did come up yesterday in the session in the School of Grammar regarding school supply list for distance learning versus in person. And Janelle's response was yes, they are at this point. I think we took that question back to review just to see if there are some things that may not be needed. So we can clarify that.
And I think anything that might be different, if we looked at anything that was to change, would be making sure that things that are like those little individual things of tissues, that would be recommended that you would have for your child. We don't normally have those little individual things for the schools of logic and rhetoric, but knowing we're trying to limit how many things that multiple hands touch, that would be something where you want to think about when you're buying school supplies, is individuals rather than common areas that things can spread the virus. So we did the PLC Canvas platform. Yes, you can use iPads. Will desk and materials be clean in between classroom switches? Paula, do you want to talk about how often those are going to be cleaned?
Yep. So the surfaces will be cleaned on an every 2-hour basis. And so, yes, they will be cleaned between classroom switches. Again, they will be using products that are recommended by the CDC and by the Department of Health. We're going to be doing kind of a combination of, cleaning throughout the day, every 2 hours, and then also increased cleaning at the end of the day, and then weekly cleaning as well, using different products that have been recommended to us. And those are specifically talked about in the operations section of the roadmap.
So is the ultimate decision of what the school is doing, hybrid, distance, coming from the state, or does the school have a say? and our mask color and type specific as the uniform is. The easy question about mask, we already touched that one. Just make it simple. No political messages, swear words, things like that. Just simple masks is what's appropriate. One of the things, getting back to the first part, the school is not going to deviate from what is really recommended, because what's recommended is based off what CDC and the World Health Organization. So we have all 3 plans ready to go. And if we use all 3 and be able to pivot because of health concerns, then we will. But we're going to take the guidance from the governor under real serious consideration and more than likely do what he says.
But I know that the guidance says that we can choose a more restrictive model than what is recommended, but we cannot choose a least restrictive model. So agree, we have to really look at what's recommended and make our decision based on the facts.
If we are distance learning, the assumption is that we should not buy the school supply kits that get sent to school and instead make sure we have the materials at home.
I can answer that.
Thank you, Jody.
School supply kits are sent to your home. They are not sent to the school. They had a couple years back, but no longer. And they can be customized to anything you want. So if you're doing distance learning and you don't need 2 containers of hand sanitizer, you can eliminate them from your list. Same thing with anything else that's on there that you already have. So just to clarify.
Perfect. So yes, we will be cleaning every 2 hours, switching class every 50 minutes. Is there a critical mass that you would need to have students in the building? And if yes, what is that number? Paula, so that question you're asking, is there like a maximum capacity of students?
Yes. Yep, so we've actually gone through with the consultants and looked at, based on the classroom size, what is the maximum number of students. So it varies from classroom to classroom, and there will be a signage outside of each of the classrooms identifying how many students can be in there. So all of that will be taken into consideration when we look at, based on what the guidance says, what kind of model we go with and how many children we can have in the classroom at one time. So it is going to be dependent on the option for what type of learning we do, and then the numbers of students that are opting for in-person education versus doing distance learning. The first part of your question, as far as cleaning, that classes are every 50 minutes. So yes, we are going to be doing, we will be cleaning in between classes, but then they also will do scheduled cleaning every 2 hours. So they're, going to have to take into consideration the need for that a little bit of an additional time during the classroom instruction time to make sure that they can do the cleaning. So we want to make sure that teachers are on kind of a regular cadence with the cleaning, and that it does get done at a minimum of every 2 hours. And that it would include kids doing hand sanitizing or hand washing every 2 hours as well. But if we're doing it every 50 minutes, that's even better.
Yeah, and just kind of the rule of what we've been recommended, or the kind of the rule of thumb is, if you have to have the students in present with you, if you have to have face-to-face, you got to reduce the number of the participants. So we definitely want to make sure that the students who are in the building, that's why we're breaking them up into half.
Mm-hmm.
And we do know that when we started the survey and we got the results back from the parents, about 25% of our families want to go distance learning the whole time, the whole year, if they could. So that does kind of limit already how many people are in the building. And then when you take 75% and divide that by half. So we are looking at having a reduced number of students in the building already. Okay. Any more questions?
I have a question. Is it okay to just ask it
Yep,
versus?
yeah,
put it
you
in the
can just
chat?
ask them out now. We have, we only have about 15 or so minutes left. That'd be the easiest.
For families just deciding to use distance learning for the year, I know I can't remember if it was the roadmap or, which one of those pieces of information, it had said priority will be given to those families that have medical needs for it. Is there a certain number that is allowed to do distance learning? Would there be a cutoff at some point that it's not a choice anymore? That do you understand what I'm saying? It said
I do.
priority would be given, so that's what I'm questioning. Thank you.
Yep, I think the priority and how that was being discussed was if they needed technology, that we needed to provide them technology that they might not have had or you don't have. But parents who want to do distance learning the whole time, if that's something that you feel strongly about, then that's how you're going to go. And we're going to make sure that students who are distance learning get a fair and equitable education, just as quality as if they were in the building, and that's our goal.
Thank you.
Are the class switches staggered? We are looking at that very closely to make sure that we don't have all kids in the building or in the hallways at the same time. That's just one of the things that we have to be looking at a little bit more closely when we get all of our enrollment numbers based on for the fall. So we are looking at that right now and we'll have a better answer for that. But yeah, we don't want everybody in the hall at the same time. That is absolutely true. And like I said earlier, we are making sure that it's one ways so that students aren't facing each other. In middle school, attendance is taken by class period. How would that work for distance learning when on camera? The same exact way. When you're on camera, you have to say here, checking in on time, just like when this meeting started at 10 o'clock, we would take attendance at 10 o'clock. And if you show up late, if it's a technology issue, we understand that, but it's still one of those, the tardy would be marked tardy, and then we would definitely work with the student if there's a technology issue that needs to be helped. Do you need a new computer? Is it an internet access issue? That's just one of the areas that we as an administration staff are also looking at, is the way that we help our students is changing as well. For students who struggle with how to maintain being on time in a virtual world, they might need some extra tools, or how to make a schedule. What is their location, where they're working at? Do they need headphones because it's loud and there's, you've got siblings in there? Those are things that we also are looking at to make sure that the environment that they're learning at, and we can't go to everyone's homes, but the environment that you're learning at does have an effect on how you learn and what you learn. So Ryan, that was a really good question. In middle school, okay. All right, any more questions?
Yeah, I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead, Joe.
Oh, no worries, sorry. Just quickly, and I'm sorry I couldn't get in the meeting right away. If you could run through the guidelines, and you don't have to get into the specifics so much, but when a child or a parent is found with the COVID disease, is there a time period? Is there a negative test period? What is the guidelines of coming back to school?
So
I'll let you take that.
Sure. So if a child or a parent or a sibling, somewhere where we would consider it a close contact, an in-house contact, is diagnosed with COVID-19, we would defer to the Department of Health for guidance as far as when children can return back to school. And so they would direct our decisions based on that, because certainly if the student or parents are still exhibiting symptoms and still have a positive test, that would lengthen the amount of time that they'd have to be out. So we're going to have to deal with each case on an individual basis and defer to the Department of Health for their guidance as far as when it's appropriate for the student to come back.
So are there any things or topics that we haven't addressed that you think we might have missed or you have input on at this time? And if you still have questions, feel free to ask those as well. When will bus stops be finalized? I don't have the exact answer for that. That's something I would have to talk with Karen Connor about, but I will talk to her today and we will reach out to make sure all parents know that.
I know that she was working on transportation because certainly there's some guidance with transportation as far as capacity limits. And so I know that she was determining number of buses needed. So yeah, we can certainly get back to the group.
In hybrid days, how many days each kid come to school? So if we go hybrid, we would go Monday, you split it up, Group A and Group B. So go 1 week at a time. Group A would be in the building. So the first week, let's do first week of school. Group A, you would be in the building, those students, on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Group B's at home Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Now, Friday for Group A, they stay home as well, and the teachers stay home on Friday. So everyone's home on Fridays to give us time to clean the building and also allow teachers to do some planning for next week as well. So the distance learning would happen for Group B, Monday through Friday for the second week, and then we just flip. So 1 week Monday, 1 week Group A is in the building, and the next week it just flip-flops. But every Friday, both groups are at home along with staff. Let's see. When do we need to know the family's choice to be in the school for distance? That was August 7th. And that was on page, oh, it's in the roadmap. It's kind of thick. Paula, do you know what page that is?
I'm looking right now.
Page 26. If we already signed and paid for a bus contract, will we be refunded if we choose distance learning? Good question. I will talk to Karen Connor and we'll make sure that's shared.
I think that Karen did say that, yes, they were. And she knew that that would probably be the case.
And can you address what is the protocol if there's a known case of COVID within a classroom? Does that shut down that classroom?
So if there is a known case in the classroom, again, we will notify the Department of Health. that we have a case, the Department of Health will guide us through our next steps. We haven't gotten formal guidance as far as do we need to close the classroom. It really depends on the grade of the student, if they're in a cohort or not. If it's a school of grammar where they stay with their class all the time, that may be different, but the Department of Health will guide us. Certainly, the contact tracing that needs to be done happens with the Department of Health. So, you know, we would have to give the Department of Health the names of those who have been exposed. And I would work collaboratively with the Department of Health to notify parents and staff who were related to the exposure. Certainly we have to be mindful of HIPAA regulations. So when communicating that information to the families, I would have to, you know, appropriately give that information without divulging the specific student's information. But again, this is really going to have to be followed following the Department of Health's guidance as to what we need to do when there's an exposure. My hope is that we don't have it, but I know that that's probably not realistic. And I, you know, as I've been working every week with the Department of Health and all other school nurses throughout the state of Minnesota, you know, this is certainly a hot topic for us, and we want to make sure that we lean on the people that are the experts versus developing plans that may not be adequate as far as what we need to do if we have an outbreak.
Paula, also you can find the, oh, thank you, Jane, for putting that on there. The roadmap is on the landing page for for our school website. It is kind of lengthy. There's 32 pages, but it's really good information. And that's, so if you have any future questions, you can definitely look there, but also you can also reach back to Paula, myself, or Jane, and we'll definitely make sure that you get an answer to whatever that question might be. Any other questions, concerns, ideas that we might have missed?
We just have one last one here. Let's see, have the roadmap. Do you have teachers not coming back due to health concerns, or are they waiting?
They're waiting. Teachers, yeah, everybody's waiting to find out what exactly it is that we will be doing. But we are ready for all three options. We do know that we do need to do a little bit of tweaking, and we've got the time to do that. All of our staff is on board. We're all in 100%, whatever it takes to make sure that our students get a fair and equitable education, no matter if they're on campus or at home. So we're all in this, and we're all in it to get it done and do it with fidelity. So
can I add one thing, Ramel, too? I think, you know, we've, the ERA staff has worked so hard on coming up with our three options and really trying to do it with obviously our kids and staff safety at the forefront of our goals with this. But what we realize as we're moving forward and school is going to be upon us before we know, the huge importance of the parent involvement with making sure that you're screening your kids. I think if anything, this is the year that I'm going to rely on you as the parents to be the people watching your children and looking for signs and symptoms and reaching out to me to let me know if you have concerns. This is not a year to send kids to school sick. And so let's have communication, and doing those daily health checks are going to be very, very helpful for me to know, to have a finger on the pulse of what's going on within the school so that I can be aware of subtle changes that might lead us to something. And I'd rather be proactive rather than being reactive. So in advance, thank you for your help.
And I also just want to reassure the parents on the academic side of this. staff is really, we're ramping up the staff to really be aware and be proactive in looking for students who are struggling with the new platform, with what distance learning would look like, how to work within the frameworks of it. We've all been used to face. We had a little bit of exposure to the idea of distance learning in the spring, but it was more asynchronous. It wasn't synchronous. And now we have a new platform that we want to make it consistent for everybody so that it's easier for parents, it's easier for teachers as well as students. So we know that we all have this learning curve that we're going to have in the fall right away, but it's something that it's attainable, it's doable. And it's just gonna, a little bit of grace is gonna have to happen for everybody, but it's something that we're gonna do, and we are planning to make sure that we're ready to go day one. Any other questions or concerns? Because I see it's almost time here. And of course, you can always email me directly and I'll try and answer anything you can or anything you need. Okay, well, with that, I want to say thank you for coming. Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Paula, for providing your expertise. Paula, it's going to be we're going to need you more than ever, right? And our
Job
teachers,
security.
yeah, our teachers, I'm looking forward to working with them more and making sure that our kids get everything they get. So parents, thank you for sitting in. If you have any other questions or concerns, please feel free to reach out. We'll make sure that those get addressed. Have a great day.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you.